Hey there, true crime aficionados and thrill seekers. Before we dive into a chilling tale that will undoubtedly leave you questioning the ordinary, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss a single spine-tingling chapter of this gripping saga. Trust me, what you're about to read isn't just a story. It's a descent into the dark corners of the human psyche, a journey into the life of a monster hiding in plain sight. Prepare yourselves, because the world you thought you knew is about to unravel. The hum of fluorescent lights in the open-plan office of Sterling and Associates Financial Services was a constant, almost comforting drone. It was the soundtrack to 1,000 mundane Tuesdays, a symphony of keystrokes, hushed phone calls, and the occasional clink of a coffee mug. For Arthur Penhaligon, a senior accountant with a meticulously organized desk and an equally meticulous life, this hum was his solace. Or so it seemed. Arthur was, by all accounts, unremarkable. Medium height, thinning brown hair always neatly combed, wire-rimmed glasses perched on a nose that had seen better days, and a wardrobe consisting primarily of sensible gray and navy suits. He was the kind of man you'd pass on the street and instantly forget, a ghost in the urban landscape. His colleagues, a mix of ambitious millennials and weary veterans, considered him dependable, if a little unexciting. He always met deadlines, never rocked the boat, and his financial reports were legendary for their accuracy. Arthur could find a misplaced cent in a billion-dollar transaction. His boss, a Miss Eleanor Vance, would often quip, a rare smile gracing her usually stern face. But beneath the neatly pressed shirts and the carefully calculated spreadsheets, Arthur Penhaligon was a storm brewing, a meticulously crafted facade over a mind teeming with dark, unspeakable desires. His meticulousness wasn't just a professional trait. It was a psychological imperative. Every expense report, every tax form, every quarterly projection was a practice in control, a way to exert his will over the chaotic variables of the financial world. And as it turned out, over the chaotic variables of human life. The first incident was, to the public, an isolated tragedy. Sarah Jenkins, a bright, ambitious junior analyst from Sterling and Associates, was found dead in her apartment, the victim of a brutal, unprovoked attack. The police investigation quickly stalled. No forced entry, no clear motive, just a young life extinguished with a chilling efficiency. The office was somber for a week, hushed condolences exchanged, flowers placed on Sarah's vacant desk. Arthur, in his own quiet way, offered his sympathies to her grieving family, his voice a low, steady murmur of appropriate platitudes. He even spearheaded a collection for a memorial fund, his name conspicuously listed as the primary donor. No one suspected a thing. Why would they? Arthur Penhaligon was a pillar of the community, a man who volunteered at the local animal shelter and always remembered to bring donuts for his team on Fridays. The second incident followed 6 months later, casting a longer, more ominous shadow. Mark Harrison, a boisterous, somewhat arrogant sales manager known for his lavish spending habits and his penchant for rubbing colleagues the wrong way, vanished without a trace. His car was found abandoned at a secluded trailhead upstate, keys still in the ignition, a half-eaten granola bar on the passenger seat. The police suspected foul play but had no leads. Mark had made many enemies, both professionally and personally. The prevailing theory was a disgruntled client or a gambling debt gone wrong. Arthur, ever the pragmatist, suggested the company put a hold on Mark's outstanding expense reports. A purely financial decision, he explained, to protect Sterling and Associates from potential liabilities. He handled the paperwork with his usual unwavering precision. These two disappearances, though distinct, began to ripple through the psyche of the office. A subtle paranoia started to set in. People started locking their doors more carefully, looking over their shoulders on their evening commutes. Conversations became quieter, laughter less frequent. The hum of the fluorescent lights, once comforting, now seemed to amplify the unspoken anxieties. Arthur, however, remained an unyielding island of calm. He continued his work with an almost serene dedication, his fingers dancing across the calculator keys, his pen scratching across paper with the rhythmic precision of a metronome. He was the anchor in a sea of unease, the embodiment of stability. He would often offer reassuring words to his colleagues, a gentle reminder that life went on, that one must focus on the task at hand. "We can't let fear paralyze us, can we?" he'd say, his voice soft, almost paternal. But in the solitary confines of his small, meticulously tidy apartment, Arthur was anything but calm. The walls, painted a sterile off-white, bore no personal touches, no photographs, no artwork. Only a single, large, framed certificate of his CPA licensure hung prominently in the living room, a testament to his profession, his carefully cultivated identity. Here, in the privacy of his domain, the mask would slip. The neat hair would become slightly disheveled as he ran his hands through it, a nervous habit that never manifested in public. The wire-rimmed glasses would be taken off, revealing eyes that, without their protective barrier, held a disturbing, almost predatory glint. His evenings were not spent unwinding with television or a good book. Instead, they were dedicated to a different kind of ledger, a grim inventory of his actions. In a locked, fireproof safe hidden behind a loose brick in his fireplace, Arthur kept a series of small, leather-bound notebooks. These weren't filled with financial figures, but with meticulously detailed accounts of his victims. Each page was a chilling narrative, a clinical dissection of a life taken. Sarah Jenkins' page was filled with details of her daily routine, her usual coffee order, the route she took home, the specific time she typically entered her apartment. His handwritten notes described the opportunity that presented itself, a moment of vulnerability, a lapse in her usual caution. He documented the method with a detached scientific precision, the efficiency of the strike, the minimal struggle. There were no expressions of remorse, no moral quandaries, only an evaluation of the effectiveness of his execution. Mark Harrison's entry was equally chilling. Mark's arrogance, his public boasting about his weekend getaways, his careless revelation of his secluded cabin in the woods, these were all meticulously observed and noted. Arthur saw Mark not as a human being, but as a set of predictable variables, a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed. He described the logistical challenges of the remote location, the advantage of isolation. He even critiqued his own performance, noting areas for improvement in the disposal process. These notebooks were not just records. They were trophies, a perverse form of artistic expression. Each victim was a canvas, and Arthur, the meticulous artist, meticulously sculpted their demise. The thrill wasn't just in the act itself, but in the planning, the execution, and the subsequent cleanup, both physical and metaphorical. He delighted in watching the police fumble, in hearing the speculative whispers of his colleagues, knowing that the truth was hidden in plain sight, under the unassuming guise of Arthur Penhaligon, the reliable accountant. The motive for Arthur was a complex, twisted tapestry. It wasn't about anger or revenge in the conventional sense. It was about control. In a world where financial markets swung wildly and human emotions were notoriously unpredictable, Arthur craved absolute command. His job as an accountant was a way to impose order on numbers, to bend them to his will, to ensure perfect balance. But human beings were far more recalcitrant, far more chaotic. And so, he sought to impose the ultimate order, to silence the noise, to remove the variables that threatened his carefully constructed internal world. He saw the flaws in others as opportunities. Sarah, with her naive trust and her predictable routines. Mark, with his ego and his carelessness. They were weak links, imperfections in the grand design of his perceived reality. And Arthur, the meticulous auditor, saw it as his duty to rectify those imperfections. The office, once a symbol of his professional success, was slowly becoming his hunting ground. He studied his colleagues not for their financial acumen, but for their vulnerabilities, their habits, their patterns. He became an expert in their lives, a silent, unseen predator meticulously charting the movements of his prey. One evening, as the office slowly emptied, Arthur lingered at his desk. He watched Ms. Eleanor Vance, his stern but fair boss, gather her belongings. Eleanor was a formidable woman, a veteran of the financial world, respected and feared in equal measure. She had a sharp mind, an even sharper tongue, and an uncanny ability to see through pretense. She was also meticulous, a trait Arthur admired, even as he internally acknowledged the threat it posed to his carefully constructed secrecy. Eleanor was known for working late, often the last one to leave. She had a habit of leaving her office door slightly ajar, the light from her desk lamp casting a warm glow into the darkening hallway. Arthur observed her with the intense, focused gaze of a hawk. He noted her route to the coffee machine, her preference for a specific brand of herbal tea, the way she always double-checked her purse before leaving. He had often wondered about Eleanor. She was a woman of unwavering principle, someone who would undoubtedly be relentless in pursuing justice if she ever suspected a wrong. And that made her both a potential threat and, to Arthur's twisted mind, an intriguing challenge. He considered her a worthy opponent, a puzzle that would require a different level of precision, a more intricate design. As Eleanor finally turned off her lights and her footsteps echoed down the hallway towards the elevators, Arthur remained still, a shadow in the dimming office. He listened to the faint ding of the elevator, then the distant thud of the lobby doors closing. Silence descended, heavy and profound. Arthur rose from his desk, his movements fluid and silent. He walked towards Eleanor's now darkened office, his hand brushing lightly against the polished wood of her door. He paused, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. The hum of the fluorescent lights, now the only sound, seemed to whisper a name that, in Arthur Penhaligon's private ledger of shadows, was slowly beginning to take shape. The stage was set. The meticulous accountant, the silent predator, was just getting started. The ledger was far from full, and in the heart of America, a chilling new chapter was about to be written, one meticulously calculated death at a time. And no one, absolutely no one, would suspect the man who balanced the books. The third victim, Jeremy Walsh, was a loud, garrulous stockbroker who worked on the floor below Sterling and Associates. Jeremy was the antithesis of Arthur Penhaligon. Flashy suits, a booming laugh that echoed through the building, and a seemingly endless supply of questionable jokes. He was known for his late-night poker games and his habit of boasting about his latest big score. His disappearance, however, was far more public and thus, far more alarming than the previous two. Jeremy vanished from a popular downtown bar after a raucous Friday night celebration with colleagues. CCTV footage showed him leaving the establishment alone, slightly intoxicated. And then, nothing. The next morning, his custom-made sports car was found abandoned blocks away, doors ajar, a half-empty bottle of expensive champagne still chilling in the back seat. Unlike Mark Harrison's isolated disappearance, Jeremy's vanishing act in a bustling urban environment sent a clear, undeniable ripple of terror through the city. The media, initially cautiously covering the earlier incidents, now descended like vultures. "The vanishing menace," screamed one headline. "Serial killer on the loose?" speculated another. The police, under immense pressure, launched a massive manhunt, but again, came up empty-handed. No witnesses, no clear forensic evidence, just a void where a life once was. Back at Sterling and Associates, the atmosphere was suffocating. The earlier unease had solidified into palpable fear. Colleagues eyed each other suspiciously, whispers turning into hushed conversations about safety and self-preservation. Some employees started working from home, others insisted on being escorted to their cars. The fluorescent hum, once a symbol of mundane routine, now felt like a high-pitched shriek, a constant reminder of the unseen danger lurking. Arthur Penhaligon, true to form, remained outwardly unperturbed. He continued to churn out his reports, his calculations precise, his demeanor unruffled. He would calmly assure nervous colleagues, offering sensible advice about vigilance and personal safety. "It's a tragic situation, undoubtedly," he'd say, his voice a low, steady bomb. "But we must remain rational. Panic only breeds more danger." Behind this carefully constructed veneer of rationality, however, Arthur was experiencing a different kind of thrill. Jeremy Walsh had been a more complex target, a higher-stakes game. His public persona, his constant presence in social settings, had required a different level of planning, a more intricate web of misdirection. Arthur had spent weeks observing Jeremy, noting his habits, his vulnerabilities, his predictable patterns of recklessness. He had even, on occasion, joined the periphery of Jeremy's social circle, a silent observer in the boisterous crowd, meticulously gathering information. The leather-bound notebook dedicated to Jeremy Walsh now held several pages of chilling detail. Arthur had painstakingly documented Jeremy's movements on that fateful Friday night, his alcohol consumption, the exact moment he separated from his friends. He described the opportunity created by hubris, Jeremy's overconfidence in his ability to navigate the city alone. The disposal method, a calculated move involving a prearranged vehicle and a secluded location hundreds of miles away, was described with the same detached analysis as a financial transaction. He even included a small, almost imperceptible drawing of a detailed map, highlighting the route taken, a testament to the comprehensive nature of his planning. What the public saw as an inexplicable disappearance, Arthur saw as a perfectly executed accounting of a life. Each victim was a deficit, an imbalance that he, the ultimate auditor, was correcting. The balance sheet of his internal world required constant adjustment, constant elimination of perceived imperfections. The escalating media frenzy, the palpable fear in the city, the frantic police investigation, all of it fueled a perverse sense of satisfaction in Arthur. He was orchestrating a grand, unseen performance, and the entire city was his unwitting audience. He reveled in the irony that the man entrusted with balancing the books was the one causing the greatest imbalance of all. But the heightened scrutiny also meant increased risk. Detective Miller, a grizzled veteran of the NYPD with a reputation for tenacity, was now leading the combined task force investigating the disappearances. Miller was a man of quiet intensity, his eyes missing nothing, his mind constantly piecing together disparate fragments of information. He had a gut feeling, an instinct honed over decades, that these seemingly unrelated cases were connected. He also had an unsettling sense that the killer was not a random street predator, but someone far more intelligent, far more methodical. Miller focused his investigation on the one common thread: the victim's connections, however tenuous, to the financial world. Sarah Jenkins, an analyst at Sterling and Associates. Mark Harrison, a sales manager for a related firm. Jeremy Walsh, a stockbroker in a neighboring building. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was enough to narrow the scope. He began discreetly interviewing employees from various financial institutions, including Sterling and Associates. When Detective Miller arrived at Sterling and Associates, his presence sent a fresh wave of anxiety through the office. He interviewed several employees, asking probing questions about their colleagues, their routines, any unusual behavior they might have noticed. When he finally sat down with Arthur Penhaligon, the air in the small conference room was thick with unspoken tension. Arthur, as always, was impeccably composed. He answered Miller's questions with a calm, even tone, providing precise details about his work schedule, his interactions with the victims, his observations about the office atmosphere. He was helpful, articulate, and utterly devoid of any suspicious tells. He even offered to assist Miller with any financial records the detective might need, a gesture of civic duty. Miller, however, sensed something. Not suspicion, not yet, but a peculiar flatness, an absence of genuine emotion that was unsettling. Arthur spoke of the victims with a detached professionalism, almost as if discussing a faulty spreadsheet. Miller also noticed Arthur's meticulousness, the way he arranged the few papers on the table, the precise angle of his pen. It was a small detail, but it lodged in the detective's mind. "Mr. Penhaligon," Miller said, his voice low, "you seem remarkably unaffected by all this. Your colleagues are quite shaken." Arthur offered a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Detective, I believe in maintaining a clear head, especially in times of crisis. Panic serves no one. My duty as an accountant is to bring order to chaos. I apply that principle to my life as well." Miller nodded slowly, his gaze unwavering. "And what about emotion, Mr. Penhaligon? Don't you feel any fear? Any sadness for these lost lives? Arthur paused, his eyes briefly flicking away, then returning to Miller's. Of course, detective. Deeply. But dwelling on emotion can cloud one's judgment. I find that focusing on the practicalities, on what can be done, is more productive. Miller thanked Arthur for his time, but as he left the conference room, a flicker of unease remained. Arthur Penhaligon was too perfect, too composed. In a world spiraling into fear, his unwavering calm felt less like strength and more like something else, something cold and calculating. Meanwhile, Arthur, back at his desk, felt a surge of exhilaration. Miller's visit had been a test, and he had passed with flying colors. The detective, for all his experience, had been unable to penetrate the meticulously constructed facade. Arthur saw it as further validation of his methods, a confirmation of his superior intellect. He was untouchable, invisible, but the encounter also injected a new variable into his equation. Detective Miller was intelligent, persistent. He wouldn't give up easily. Arthur realized he would have to be even more careful, even more precise. The game was escalating, and Arthur, the master strategist, was ready for the challenge. His mind began to drift not to new victims, but to the next phase of his grand design. He was not just eliminating individuals, he was demonstrating a power, a control that transcended the mundane world of ledgers and balance sheets. He was sending a message, a chilling declaration of his ultimate authority. One evening, as the city lights twinkled outside his apartment window, Arthur found himself staring at the framed CPA certificate on his wall. It had once been a symbol of his professional achievement, a mark of his dedication to order and precision. Now it felt like a relic of a past life, a quaint reminder of the identity he had so carefully shed. His gaze then shifted to the hidden safe in his fireplace, to the leather-bound notebooks within. The pages were filling up, each entry a testament to his prowess. He was building a different kind of ledger, a grim account of his power, his ability to manipulate, to erase. The thrill intensified with each passing day. He was living a double life, a seamless existence that fooled everyone. The quiet accountant during the day, the meticulous predator by night. The two identities were so perfectly integrated that even Arthur himself sometimes struggled to separate them. Or perhaps he simply didn't want to. The city continued to reel, its sense of security shattered. The news was dominated by the elusive accountant killer, a name whispered in hushed tones, conjuring images of a calculating, emotionless monster. They were closer than they knew. The monster was not some shadowy figure in the dark alley, but the man who sat just a few desks away, diligently balancing the books. Arthur knew the police were circling, that the pressure was mounting, but he also knew his system was flawless. He had no weaknesses, no emotional ties, no slip-ups. He was a perfect machine, an algorithm of destruction, and he was far from finished. The balance sheet of his terror was still in flux, still awaiting its final, devastating entries. The hum of the city, once a comforting backdrop, now felt like a chorus of silent screams. And Arthur Penhaligon, the unassuming accountant, was the conductor of this macabre symphony, meticulously directing each terrifying note. The game was on, and the stakes were higher than ever. And in his twisted mind, the next account was already being processed. The city was a tinderbox, and the news of another disappearance was the spark that ignited it. This time, it was a prominent lawyer, Martha Sterling, the granddaughter of the founder of Sterling and Associates. Martha was not an employee of the firm, but her familial connection was undeniable, and her public profile was immense. She vanished from her heavily secured penthouse apartment, leaving no trace of forced entry, no signs of struggle, only an alarm system that had inexplicably failed. This abduction was different. It was audacious, calculated to send a definitive message. The police, led by a visibly weary but determined Detective Miller, were now in a full-blown crisis. The accountant killer, as the media had dubbed him, was no longer just targeting people within the periphery of the financial world. He was directly challenging the very foundations of power and security. The public outcry was deafening. Protests erupted, demanding answers, demanding justice. The mayor convened emergency meetings, promising unlimited resources to catch the elusive killer. The pressure on Detective Miller was immense, a crushing weight that threatened to break him. But it also sharpened his focus, stripping away all distractions. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that this killer was not acting randomly. There was a method, a twisted logic at play. Miller revisited the Sterling and Associates connection with renewed intensity. The only constant thread in all the disappearances, no matter how distant, seemed to lead back to the firm or its immediate orbit. He ordered a deep dive into every employee, past and present, every contractor, every client with significant access. This time, he wasn't just looking for suspects. He was looking for patterns, for anomalies, for anything that didn't quite fit. Back at Sterling and Associates, the once bustling office was a ghost town. Most employees were working remotely. The few who remained were visibly on edge, their eyes constantly darting, their conversations hushed and paranoid. The hum of the fluorescent lights, once a subtle presence, now felt like a blaring siren, a constant reminder of the pervasive fear. Arthur Penhaligon, however, still reported to the office every day. He insisted on it, citing the importance of maintaining continuity and setting an example of resilience. He would calmly attend the daily virtual meetings, his background a perfectly ordered home office, his face a picture of serene composure. In person, he was the unflappable anchor, the last bastion of normalcy in a world gone mad. He offered Eleanor Vance, his boss, his professional opinion on how to handle the financial fallout of Martha Sterling's disappearance. His voice calm, rational, almost comforting. Eleanor, however, was cracking. The stress, the fear, the personal connection to Martha, all weighed heavily on her. She had always been a strong, formidable woman, but the relentless pressure was eroding her resolve. She found herself increasingly relying on Arthur, his quiet strength a strange comfort in the chaos. He was the only one who seemed to have a clear head, the only one who didn't succumb to the pervasive fear. But a seed of doubt had been planted in Eleanor's mind after Detective Miller's repeated visits. Miller had confided in her about his gut feeling about a methodical killer, someone hiding in plain sight. He had also subtly, almost imperceptibly, steered the conversation back to Arthur, mentioning his unusual composure. Eleanor, initially dismissive, began to observe Arthur more closely. She noticed the small things. The way his desk was always immaculately organized, even at the end of a chaotic day. The way he always arrived precisely on time, left precisely on time. The way his eyes, behind the wire-rimmed glasses, held a strange, almost vacant intensity when he thought no one was watching. He was too perfect, too controlled, almost inhumanly so. One evening, after everyone else had left, Eleanor stayed late, ostensibly to catch up on work. But her real mission was to delve deeper, to find the anomaly, the one thing that didn't balance in Arthur Penhaligon's perfectly constructed ledger. She started by subtly checking his archived reports, cross-referencing them with company records, looking for anything out of place, any slight miscalculation. She found nothing. His work was, as always, flawless. Frustrated, she walked to Arthur's desk, a strange compulsion guiding her. It was spotless, a testament to his meticulous nature. But then, she noticed a faint, almost imperceptible smudge on the underside of his desk drawer. It was an odd place for a smudge, easily missed unless one was actively looking for imperfections. Driven by a sudden, inexplicable premonition, she reached under the drawer and felt a small, sticky residue. Felt like dried glue. Her heart pounded. Why would there be glue under Arthur's desk drawer? It seemed trivial, but in the context of Miller's warnings and her own burgeoning unease, it felt significant. She remembered Arthur's peculiar neatness, his abhorrence of any disarray. A sticky residue would have been anathema to him, yet it was there, hidden from plain view. She pulled the drawer open, her fingers trembling. As she did, she heard a faint, almost inaudible click. Her eyes narrowed. On the underside of the top of the desk, directly above the drawer, was a small, almost invisible indentation. It was a pressure switch. Eleanor, her mind racing, cautiously pressed the indentation. Another faint click. Then, with a soft whir, a section of the false back panel of the desk slowly retracted, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, nestled amongst neatly stacked files, were several small, leather-bound notebooks. Her breath hitched. These weren't financial ledgers. She pulled one out, her hands shaking as she opened it. The first page was dedicated to Sarah Jenkins. Her eyes widened in horror as she read the chilling, clinical description of Sarah's life, her vulnerabilities, her demise, written in Arthur's familiar, precise handwriting. The second notebook, Mark Harrison. The third, Jeremy Walsh. And then, a new one, disturbingly blank, except for a single, chilling inscription on the first page. Martha Sterling. Opportunity. Unlocked. Eleanor felt a wave of nausea, a cold dread washing over her. The hum of the fluorescent lights suddenly seemed deafening, the silence of the office utterly terrifying. Arthur Penhaligon, the quiet accountant, the monster. He had been hiding in plain sight, an embodiment of pure, calculating evil. She knew she had to act quickly. This wasn't just evidence. It was a map to a serial killer. She carefully placed the notebooks back, closed the hidden compartment, and wiped away the glue residue with a tissue, leaving no trace. Her mind was a whirlwind, but a core of steel had formed within her. She would expose him. As she made her way out of the office, her eyes scanning every shadow, every corner, she felt a profound shift. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was now overshadowed by a burning resolve. She had seen the true face of the accountant killer, and she would not rest until justice was served. The next morning, Eleanor contacted Detective Miller, her voice calm but her words urgent. "Detective," she said, "I think I've found something that changes everything." Miller, sensing the gravity in her tone, listened intently as Eleanor recounted her discovery. His face, usually impassive, slowly hardened with a grim determination. "Ms. Vance," he said, "you've just cracked the case." The arrest of Arthur Penhaligon was a seismic event that rocked the nation. The man who had been the embodiment of unremarkable professionalism, the quiet accountant, was revealed as one of America's most chilling serial killers. The news cycle exploded, his meticulously kept notebooks providing a horrifying glimpse into the mind of a monster. The revelations shocked everyone, especially his colleagues, who struggled to reconcile the image of the helpful, dependable Arthur with the cold-blooded killer. The trial was a media circus, a spectacle of horror and disbelief. Arthur, however, remained impassive, almost serene. He pleaded not guilty, and his defense argued for mental instability, but the overwhelming evidence, including his own detailed ledgers of death, was irrefutable. His meticulousness, once his greatest asset, became his undoing. During his sentencing, when given the opportunity to speak, Arthur merely offered a chilling, almost philosophical statement, his voice calm and level. "I simply sought to bring order to the chaos," he said, his eyes scanning the packed courtroom, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. "To balance the accounts. Some ledgers simply require more decisive adjustments." He was sentenced to multiple life terms, without the possibility of parole. His name, once synonymous with quiet competence, became a byword for terror, a stark reminder that evil could wear the most unassuming of faces. Detective Miller, reflecting on the case, often thought about Arthur's peculiar calm. It wasn't the calm of innocence, but the chilling calm of absolute control, a psychopathy so profound it mimicked sanity. He had been so focused on the outward chaos, he had almost missed the meticulous order of the killer's mind. Eleanor Vance, the woman who had unearthed the truth, eventually left Sterling and Associates. The trauma of her discovery, the realization that she had worked alongside such a monster, was too much to bear. She became an advocate for victims' rights, her experience forging a new purpose in her life. The city slowly healed, but the scars remained. The hum of fluorescent lights in office buildings would forever carry a faint echo of fear. The ordinary, everyday figures of accountants, once symbols of stability, would now, for some, always harbor a hint of the sinister. And in the annals of true crime, the story of Arthur Penhaligon, the accountant killer, became a chilling legend, a testament to the fact that the most terrifying monsters are not always found in the shadows, but often in the most ordinary of places, meticulously balancing the books one life at a time. The final audit of his victims was complete, but the haunting legacy of his deeds would forever remain an unaccounted balance in the collective conscience of a nation.